Archaeologists who have been digging in central Idaho say their research is literally changing history books. They say they have unearthed information proving that the first human inhabitants of North and South America took a totally different route.
Long before archaeologists traced patterns in ancient soil, a quiet terrace along the Salmon River guarded a secret that defied every established timeline of human arrival.
Evidence that we've obtained through excavations suggests that people may have been visiting this part of the Salmon River Canyon as early as 13,000 calendar years ago.
When layers once thought impossible revealed traces of a much older presence, the evidence began pointing toward a journey that started not on land, but along a vanishing coast now buried beneath the Pacific. A riverbank that should have been empty. When archaeologist Lauren Davis first walked the quiet riverbank in western Idaho in 2009, he expected the soil beneath his feet to echo the familiar story told in every anthropology classroom. The textbooks promised that any ancient traces of human life would belong to the Clovis people, whose fluted spear points had long defined the accepted beginning of American prehistory. The prevailing model insisted that no culture older than 13,000 years could possibly have reached this place, since the immense ice sheets covering Canada had blocked all interior migration routes. Yet the landscape carried a stillness that seemed older than the standard narrative allowed, and the sediment layers held subtle changes in color and texture that hinted at a more complex past. As the digging began, each carefully lifted scoop of earth revealed artifacts exactly where they were supposed to be, reinforcing the expectation that this terrace would simply confirm the established timeline. However, the calm rhythm of excavation soon shifted as the tools descended deeper than anyone originally planned, because the soil began offering fragments that did not belong to the world the researchers thought they understood. This riverbank, expected to be empty of deeper human history, was preparing to challenge everything. Layers that should not exist. As the excavation moved below the expected Clovis layer, the soil shifted in both color and density, revealing a darker, compacted band that immediately drew the team's attention. This layer did not simply contain scattered debris, it held a carefully constructed hearth lined with fire-cracked stones, whose fractured surfaces still carried the thermal scars of controlled, long-extinguished flames. The charcoal concentrated within its basin possessed a texture distinct enough to suggest deliberate fuel selection, and the surrounding sediments contained hundreds of razor-sharp flakes created during the production of stone tools. These were not the ephemeral traces of brief travelers, but the dense remains of people who worked, cooked, and shaped their world in a sustained and purposeful manner. The most startling materials lay beside the hearth. Bone fragments from an extinct species of Ice Age horse, their edges cut and split in ways that matched butchering patterns documented at Pleistocene hunting sites across the world. These fragments were embedded directly among the stone tools, leaving no doubt that they belonged to the same occupation layer. When samples of the charcoal were analyzed, the radiocarbon results forced the team to reconsider assumptions that had stood unchallenged for generations. The dates returned consistently between 15 and 16,000 years before the present, placing human activity in Idaho 3 millennia earlier than the textbook timeline permitted. The implications grew even more dramatic when geological context was considered. At the moment these fires once burned, the Laurentide and Cordilleran ice sheets formed a continuous, impassable barrier across Canada, sealing off the interior of North America, behind walls of ice thicker than many modern skyscrapers are tall. No terrestrial route existed for anyone to reach this location, meaning the presence of these people required an explanation that archaeology had long resisted. The soil was announcing that an entirely different journey had taken place. The unbroken line across the Pacific Rim. The deeper the team examined the artifacts, the more they realized that the mystery of Cooper's Ferry stretched far beyond the interior of Idaho. The stone points recovered from the lowest layers carried a distinctive stemmed design, a precise shaping technique that allowed the blades to be hafted securely onto wooden shafts. While this style differed markedly from the later Clovis fluted points, it aligned almost perfectly with late Upper Paleolithic technologies documented in Hokkaido, Japan, where similar tools dating to nearly 20,000 years ago shared the same reduction strategies, flake preparation methods, and overall geometry. Such a technological fingerprint was unlikely to emerge independently in two distant regions, suggesting a cultural lineage that connected northeastern Asia to the first inhabitants of the interior Pacific Northwest. For decades, archaeologists who supported a coastal migration route argued that seafaring communities possessed the navigational skills and ecological knowledge needed to travel along the Pacific shoreline. Yet, definitive physical evidence remained elusive because post-glacial sea level rise submerged the ancient coast beneath more than 100 meters of water. Recent underwater surveys along British Columbia's now drowned continental shelf changed the discussion entirely. Teams documented preserved paleo shorelines that existed 18,000 years ago, and along those hidden edges, they found human footprints pressed into what had once been coastal mudflats, as well as simple stone tools lying where shoreline foragers would have left them. These discoveries eliminated the idea that maritime travel began only after the glaciers retreated, and instead demonstrated that people were already moving along the Pacific Rim thousands of years before inland sites like Cooper's Ferry were occupied. When viewed together, the Japanese technological parallels, the submerged coastal evidence, and the impossibility of an overland route all pointed toward a single conclusion. The first people to reach Idaho came not by walking through an open corridor, but by following a rich, kelp-lined coast that served as a biological highway, guiding skilled mariners toward rivers that opened pathways deep into the continent, a people who returned again and again. As excavation continued across multiple field seasons, the picture that emerged from Cooper's Ferry no longer resembled a single moment of prehistoric settlement, but rather an enduring relationship between people and landscape. Beneath each newly removed layer lay signs of repeated return. Compacted living floors, small clusters of stone flakes that trace the rhythmic movements of toolmakers, and carefully excavated pits where communities buried high-quality implements for later use. Archaeologists recognized that such caching behavior reflected deep familiarity with the terrain because no group would hide valuable tools in a place they did not expect to revisit. The soil therefore recorded not only habitation, but the confidence of people who understood the seasonal cycles of the Salmon River and the resources that sustained them. These layers, spanning roughly 3 millennia, also revealed subtle shifts in activity that suggested intergenerational continuity. Some hearths were slightly larger, some toolkits more diverse, and some butchering areas more concentrated. Yet the overall spatial pattern remained strikingly stable, indicating that families likely returned to the same terrace at similar times of year. This persistence mirrored the ecological rhythm of the region, where spawning fish and migrating game would have encouraged seasonal movement, while still anchoring communities to familiar roots. Oral histories preserved by the Nez Perce people further enrich this picture. Their long-standing memory of a village called Ne-Pi aligned with the archaeological evidence, demonstrating that cultural knowledge endured across enormous spans of time. In this convergence of story and science, Cooper's Ferry revealed itself not as a transient encampment, but as a place where memory, tradition, and survival wove together across generations, genetic threads across millennia. While artifacts revealed how people lived at Cooper's Ferry, genetics illuminated who they were and how their story extended across the continent. In 2014, researchers sequenced the genome of the Anzac child from Montana, a 12,600-year-old burial surrounded by an elaborate Clovis toolkit. The analysis showed that this child shared ancestry with a 24,000-year-old individual from Siberia, as well as with ancestral East Asian populations, demonstrating that the founding lineage of Native Americans formed through a complex mixture long before anyone reached the Americas. This genetic lineage, isolated in Beringia for thousands of years, eventually expanded south, becoming the dominant ancestral source for most indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere. The next crucial link came from the Spirit Cave individual in Nevada, who lived 10,700 years ago and was found with Western-stemmed tradition tools nearly identical to the deeply buried implements at Cooper's Ferry. Genetic sequencing revealed that the Spirit Cave man belonged to the same broad ancestral population as the Anzac child, confirming that the artisans of the Western-stemmed tradition were not a vanished or separate migration, but an early branch of the same lineage that later produced the Clovis culture. This genetic continuity demonstrated that the people who occupied Cooper's Ferry 16,000 years ago were not an isolated community but early members of a population whose descendants spread across the continent. Their legacy survived through time, carried in both the stone they shaped and the genomes of future generations, linking the Salmon River Terrace to a vast, unbroken human story. What this changes about the story of us. The discoveries at Cooper's Ferry do more than shift dates on a timeline. They compel a re-examination of how human ingenuity shaped the earliest chapters of American history. The long-held belief that the first migrants trudged through an interior corridor collapses against evidence showing that the route never existed during the period of earliest occupation. In its place rises a portrait of maritime travelers who understood tides, kelp forests, and the seasonal movements of coastal resources with a sophistication that archaeology had previously underestimated. These individuals did not merely survive a harsh Ice Age world. They adapted to it through mobility, knowledge sharing, and sustained cultural traditions that persisted for millennia. Their story also validates indigenous oral histories that preserved memories science initially dismissed, demonstrating that the past is often held most accurately by the communities rooted in it. Through this convergence, the continent's earliest narrative becomes richer, older, and far more interconnected. What emerged from this quiet Idaho terrace now reshapes an entire continent's origin story, linking riverbanks, coastlines, and memories preserved across generations. If you want to keep exploring discoveries that challenge what we thought we knew, subscribe, stay curious, and join us as each new finding brings the past into sharper focus.